All right, so let's go over what a generic project. Okay, so all the projects should provide some form of interaction around some cloud API. Right, there's quite a lot of data out there, right, that is freely available, and they are made available through the form of APIs. So application programming interfaces, right? That if you hit them with a particular URL, HTTP some URL, right? They provide some data, either an array of data or objects, mostly in the form of JSON. Okay, JSON is a JavaScript object notation, meaning some object, some data that is formatted, already formatted to be easily consumable by a JavaScript client. So typically you will have some JavaScript client over here running on a browser, and you'll have some JavaScript AJAX call that will allow you to communicate with these third-party APIs to retrieve dynamic data, and you'll be able to then, with that data, update the DOM, right? Update the user interface. Would allow you to perhaps provide a search bar that you type terms, and as you type in the terms, these requests go out to these third-party APIs, and then retrieves data for you to then display dynamic content. Make sense? So all the projects should provide some form of interaction with one of these third-party APIs. What this API is, it's your choice, whatever you want. Okay, movies is very popular. Recipes is very popular. Sports, news, whatever. Events, healthcare, government data is also very popular. But if you think of any domain, there usually will be some API that allows you to retrieve some free data out there. Okay, all right. All right. So basically, you'll see in the requirements that I refer to you build your application around some third-party API that is out there. Okay, and we'll show you how to do this. It's very simple. Don't get scared. It'll be trivial. It says, oh, that's at some point, I hope that you'll come to say that I didn't know it was all that easy. Some of that data you will be storing in a local database. Okay, you only need to store in the database things that your application is going to need to remember, right? As your user interacts with your application, as they peruse through the remote database, right? They might once in a while they might want to either bookmark that data, or they might want to maybe write something about it, or a comment, or a review, or just store some information about that piece of information. Then you will store something in the database to remember that this person likes that particular movie, or is a fan of this particular sports team. Okay, so if you don't need to remember anything, there's no need to use the local database, right? It's fine to interact with the remote database, right? You're interacting with this API in the cloud that has its own database. Okay, there's no way that we're going to compete with that database, right? This is the source of truth, right? The only thing that we could possibly do is either expand on that data, or mesh with other data, perhaps, right? With multiple APIs, perhaps. Okay, we could aggregate some of that data. We could perhaps add some value information to that data, but this data usually is considered the source of truth, right? Somebody has gone through the trouble of populating that data and owning that data, right? We could just only aggregate, perhaps, and add value to that data, right? By creating perhaps our own community, right, around that data. Okay, so you should be able to search. You should be able to do a search, right, on that data based on some criteria. Your favorite food, your favorite sports, whatever criteria will be based on your particular domain. Yes? Right. Once you do a search, typically this will come back as an array or a collection of data points that you will display as a search result, right, in a separate page, right, that you show several search results that match that search criteria. Typically, you'll be able to click on any one particular element, right, for more details about that particular item, and in a separate details page, you will fetch the details from the API and come back with a bigger object that has all the details about that particular object, right? Perhaps if you searched a movie of a particular genre, of a particular director, it'll come back with a summary result set, right, about those movies, right, that match that particular director, yes? But if you click a particular movie, you might want to know more about that movie, right? So it'll be a separate call to the API to retrieve details about that movie, right? Who the actors are, the plot, all sorts of art information or posters, maybe some reviews, some trailers and whatnot, right? So you would display that in a separate details page, right? Up to this point, there has been no need of your local database, right? This could be an anonymous user using your little search engine, yes? Right? For querying and displaying and looking at the details. Anybody should be able to use this, right? Even folks that are anonymous users, right? Nobody has logged in yet, okay? Right, so a lot of the functionality of your application should be available to anybody, even folks who are anonymous, right? You don't have to force anybody to log in, okay? There might be some edge cases, some edge projects that you might come back to me saying, hey, it makes no sense to make this public, right? I need to force them to log in. But you have to have a very convincing reason why you would force somebody to log in, right? So make sure that you have if you want to force people to log in. If somebody wants to comment on a particular movie or review that movie or bookmark that movie, then I'll need to know who you are. Yes? Because I'll need to create an association between a particular movie, and a particular person. Yes? Then I have to force you to log in to know who you are. Yes? But not until then. Not until I need to know who you are. Then I don't need my local database. I don't need to force you to log in. Once you log in and you do want to bookmark something about a particular user, then you will go into your database and make an entry into your database saying, hey, this particular movie 123, was reviewed by user 234, right? And we'll create a relationship between the two, saying that user likes that movie, right? And we'll create those relationships in the database. Yes? Only enough to be able to remember the relationship about a particular user and a particular movie. Make sense? Okay? Now, what are we storing in this movie entry in our database? We don't need to store everything, right? There might be quite a bit of information to store about that movie, right? All the cast and all the movies and URL. We don't need to store much here. The minimum that we'll probably need is some identifier that will allow us to know what movie it is in the remote database, right? If this is IMDb or some other movie database, it'll have some unique identifier, right? That we'll need to store here. Okay, so that if somebody comes back to their profile page and wants to see the list of all the movies that they've liked or that they've reviewed and whatnot, we'll need to know that ID so that we can go at some point later on and fetch that movie at some point at a later time. Yes? Okay. Other things that you might want to store here are perhaps a small title or some label, something that is that humans could read, right? So very, very, very quickly to know that, oh, you like this particular movie and the title of that movie. Okay. Maybe you might want to store maybe a thumbnail to display a long list of movies locally, right? You might want to store that, but maybe not much more than that. Okay. So because this is always going to be a cache, right? It'll be a local copy of information that already exists in a separate database. Yes, right? And the more you store locally, the bigger the risk that you're going to fall behind or stale. Any information that you might have locally, you're copied in your local database, is at risk of becoming stale at some point, right? Because the truth is up here, right? The truth is out there, right? You only have a convenient local copy, right, or cache of that information over there. Make sense? Right? All right. So we'll need to. So these are some of the guidelines, right? And this is what I mean. This is kind of what I mean about creating an application around, right, some third-party API. Okay. Right. All right. So let's dig a little bit into this. All right, so let's look at a use case of actually doing this. So here comes a user, right? They come into your website, okay, and you'll have a home page, right? In that home page, you might have a header, a footer. In a home page, typically what you want to show here are activity of what's going on in your application on your website, right? Any new users who have joined, any new reviews folks have written. Any new movies that have created, whatever that shows activity on your website. Okay, so you'll have, and this website will be different depending on whether somebody has logged in or it is anonymous who hasn't logged in yet. Yes, right. If somebody comes to this website, we don't know who you are. This homepage will be very generic. Okay, we don't know who you are. It'll be very generic. So this will have two versions, right? So this is the homepage. We'll have a generic version, right, and a logged-in version. Okay, if you are logged in, then perhaps you'll have some identifying, maybe a username or something, or maybe information that is specific to you, right, will be displayed here. Okay, if we don't know who you are, then this page will be generic. Okay, yes.
Well, don't you log in when you're on the home page? So what's the difference?
When you come in and we don't know who you are, right? It'll show a generic page. As you navigate and you log in at some point, perhaps, if you ever come back to this home page, right, this should not be the generic page, right? If we know who you are, we display certain things. If we don't know who you are, we display different. At a minimum, right, if we don't know who you are, there should be links to log in or to register, right? But if I know who you are, then I shouldn't show the links to log in, right? I should instead show a link to maybe navigate to my profile page, right? So at a minimum, that should be there, correct? Okay. So here you might have links to do login, to register, or to go to a profile page. Yes, right. If I am not logged in, then the profile link should not show. Right? It should only show the login and the register. If I am logged in, it should show maybe the logout and the profile link, but not the register and not the login page. And perhaps say, hello, Alice, welcome back, Bob, or whatever. Okay? All right. All right. So this is your homepage. From your homepage, perhaps you click on a search. Some students like to have the search right here on the homepage. Right? Some of the students prefer it to be a standalone page. So here's your search page with some search bar, some drop down, however your API asks you to interact with it or query it or right, to ask for information. Okay. In your homepage, you should have some explanation. A short little blurb that explains what the application is all about. Right. Don't assume that I come here and I look at a search bar and I know what to type in there. Okay, if you're Google, you can get away with that, but you're not Google yet, right? So provide a little bit of explanation of what is it you want me to type in there. Okay, and maybe some tooltips or some a little paragraph under there. The search might be just a search bar, or perhaps some content, some default content in there. This could be a search or a search results page, both as you type if you click on search, this will come back with a summary search results that match. Right? When you click on search, this is going to go out to the cloud, right? With a query, with a JSON object, with a query, it's going to come back usually with some array of JSON objects, right? Which you're going to use to dynamically render this page. Okay? Everybody okay? Right? Maybe a thumbnail, maybe a title, maybe a couple things in there. If I click on one of these, it should take me to a details page, right? And those details, again, you're going to go out to the remote database with some ID, some identifying information that it's this particular sports team that I want to know information about, or about that particular match, right? Or about that particular recipe, right? Or about whatever, right? A particular a doctor, or a particular drug, or a particular whatever it is that your domain is. All right? Okay. So you go out, and then you come back with the detailed information. It comes back as a bigger object, and you dynamically render it here. Right? It'll have maybe some carousel with images, maybe, or maybe reviews about users who have reviewed this movie or this recipe or this sports fan or whatever, right? And notice that at this point there was no need to log in. Right? I haven't logged in. Okay? But if I want to say that this is my favorite movie, then I need to know who you are. Right? I can't create the relationship unless I know who it is. Right? Then this will force me to, it'll kick me out to a login page where I can type my username or password, or log in using Facebook, or log in using Google, or log in using any third-party authentication authority. Once I know who you are, then I can come back here and let you bookmark it or whatnot. Make sense? Okay. Also, same thing. If I try to create my own review, right? I should be able to. If I try to generate a post, if I'm not logged in, it shouldn't let me write a post or a review or a comment, right? Only if I am logged in. Okay. If I click on it, if I said, it should tell me, you have to first log in, kick me out to log in, and then come back, and then I could write a review. Make sense? Right? If all other users, there might be several other users who have reviewed the same movie or the same recipe, right? Their username should be displayed, right? Okay, this is what I mean. Oftentimes, what I mean by a social networking features, right? That there are other folks as part of the same community, right? That are interacting with the same piece of data, with the same data set, okay, the same domain, and we all form part of the same community, right? If I click on their username, I should be able to navigate to their profile page. So there's a profile page, and I should be able to see maybe their picture, who they are, whatever you think is public information about users. Right? Perhaps you might not show their email, their address. You might not show those things, right? That might not be considered public. Okay? If you're in your profile, you should be able to see all your private information, right? But if you're visiting somebody else's profile, you shouldn't be able to see their information. Make sense? Okay? I should be able to see any information that is associated to a user, right? I should be able to see their information. So if other users have liked, have bookmarked or commented on any other object, right? They should be listed here, right? These are all the movies they've reviewed or they've liked or anything that is associated to that particular user. Yes? Okay. If I click on any one of these, I should be able to go back to the details page. Right? Notice that this information would be stored in my local database, right? Maybe the thumbnail, maybe the title of the movie. Okay. the ID of that movie, but none of the detailed information. The detailed information is always going to live in the cloud. Right? I only have enough information to make a quick list of you for you, right? To render a long list, right? And then, but if you ask me for the details, I'm going to go back to the cloud to fetch details, and then go back to the details page and render it dynamically. Right? There's no need for me to cache all the actors, all the directors, all the plot information, all the poster images. There's no need for me to cache any of that. Right? I can go back to the details to fetch that. Make sense? Everyone okay? What else? So these over here, the reviews, the comments, the bookmarking, this is what I refer to the relationships. The relationships between a user, right, and a domain object. When I refer to a domain object, I mean any object that you need to store or to save in the database to represent your particular domain. It might be a movie, right? It might be a recipe, it might be a sports team, right? Okay. So those are the domain objects, and you create a relationship between them, right? That this user likes that sports team. Right? You need to be able to show that relationship. Okay. There's also a relationship between users and other users. Right? Maybe I navigate to a particular user's profile and says, "Ooh, wow! Look at all these great reviews that user has written." Okay, I'd like to follow that user, so you might provide a follows, right, or favorites, right, who I can bookmark that user. Right? And that's what I mean by a user-to-user relationship. Right? This user is somebody's manager. This user reports to somebody. This user can send messages to someone else. Whenever there's two users involved, right, and there's a relationship between the two, whatever relationship you choose, right, it could be a message, it could be a follows, it could be a favorites, it could be whatever you choose as a relationship. Okay? But there needs to be some relationship between users and users. Okay, so relationship between users and objects, between users and other users. Okay? What else? If I'm in my own profile, I can edit all my information, right? So this will be a form that allows me to change my, add my phone numbers, change my address, change all that information, right? It should allow me to update my profile. But if I'm visiting somebody else's profile, I shouldn't be able to edit their profile, right? It should only be a read-only. Okay. Notice that here we have a dynamic rendering of this data, right? Okay. If I click on one of these, right, it's going to navigate me to the details page. Everybody okay with that? Right. Now, if you click on the back button, right, usually the back button is automatically supported in single-page applications. It will navigate you to the previous page, no problem. Okay, but in this particular case, it's a little bit more involved, right? Because the content of this page is dynamic, right? Depends on what you searched, right? If you search for one movie, you'll get, all the Star Wars related movies. If you search for Star Trek, you get all the Star Trek related movies. Yes, right? Going back from here to here, that search will be lost. So this page will be empty. And so we'll get how to handle that. But that's what I mean by your application should support handling back buttons, right? Going back to previous pages and rendering, all that information that was captured previously. Okay, and we'll learn how to do that. Let's see, what else? Now, to capture this information, you'll need to create a data model. And that data model is going to look something like this. Not exactly, but you'll need to be able to capture information about users. So you'll need some you'll need a schema to represent your users, right? To be able to store their username, passwords, emails, phone numbers, addresses, right? You need to be able to store that. And each user will be represented as a record, right? In this collection of pieces of data. Yes? Okay. You'll also need to store information about domain objects, right? Domain objects. And that domain object depends on your domain. Right? If it's a movie, then these are movies. Right? If these are recipes, then those are recipes. Okay? And at first, there won't be any domain objects. Right? No recipes, no movies, no nothing. Right? And they only need to be here if you need to remember anything. Right? As the user searches, interacts, if there's nothing to remember, right? If they're just perusing around, right? There's nothing to store here. Only if you need to remember, right? Only if somebody actually creates a review or a comment or bookmarks a recipe, then you need to you need to search your database and say, hey, do I already have an entry for that movie or that recipe? Does that already exist in my database? If it doesn't exist, I'll need to insert it. Movie 1, 2, 3. Okay? Right? If somebody has bookmarked it, somewhere you need to store that this particular user, user 234, likes that movie. How do you represent that? Right? There's several ways, and we'll see how to represent it. One classical way would be to have a separate collection that says user to movie relationship. That says, hey, there's an entry here that says that this user likes that movie. Right? And we'll learn how to do that. Who has seen 3200 here? Anybody? 5200? No 5200. No 3200. Okay. All right, we'll learn how to do that. Okay. So you need to create a relationship between a user, right, and domain objects. Right? If a user likes another user, we'll need to have also a relationship that keeps track of who likes who or who's following who. Right? You will need to have a user-to-user relationship. Right? If somebody's following somebody, we'll need to say, hey, that user is following that other user. Right? We'll need to create relationships to capture these things. Yes? Okay. Yes?
So should the data model be responding to data that is stored or the data that flows across the application?
What do you mean?
If we are calling an API, we specify a specific type of an object.
Yeah.
That should have a specific structure. So should we add that to our data model, or it's just that what we are going to store?
Only what you need to store. Only what you need to store, and it'll be different for everybody, right? What the requirements that I'm posing, right, is that you need to be able to represent users. You need to represent relationships between users, whatever relationships you choose, what the relationships are. Okay. Also, you need to represent domain objects, right? And you get to choose what domain objects are and the schema for them too, right? And the other requirement I'm imposing is that you need to represent relationships between users and those domain objects. Okay. Another requirement is that your data model over here for the domain objects, okay, needs to be a little more complicated than this. Okay? You need to show some structure to your data, and that objects are often made up of other objects. Okay, so for instance, a quiz might be made up of several questions, right? A playlist is made up of or contains several songs. Yes, right. Both of those objects are domain objects. Playlists, songs, they're both part of the music domain. Yes, right. Quizzes and questions are both objects of that are used to represent things about courses, right? Of the life cycle of taking a course, right? Taking a quiz. Yes, right. So one of the requirements will be that your domain objects has to have at least two distinct domain objects, right? Where you might have one might be a playlist and one might be a song, right? And then you might have that this particular playlist contains several songs, right? Several songs are in that playlist. Yes? Okay. That make sense? All right. I think we have enough to be able to discuss what the requirements, the formal requirements of the project, right? So let's look at that document now.